Hail and well met, my friends. It is I, Bones McKay, and I am here to talk to you about world building. Specifically, we're going to be talking about a comic webtoon thingy of mine that is in pre-production. I've talked about it a lot, there's a whole playlist, but I try to keep everyone up and with it when I talk about it, so hopefully you're up and with it while we talk about this. What's being drawn right now on screen is from another webtoon thingy of mine slash novel slash webtoon slash thingy called The Books of Avo. It is a 1920s inspired fantasy book. Dragons smooching, dragons smooching, and it's very gay, and if you cannot wait for it to become a webtoon, it is lucky for you because a beautiful illustrated novel version already exists, and I would gladly appreciate it if you checked it out. It's on Etsy and itch.io, because heck Amazon, am I right guys? Yeah. What are we talking about? We are talking about a story of mine called Crow Story. That is what it is dubbed. There is a whole playlist that you can check out where I talk about it, but I'll try and keep you with it, hip with it. I'm sorry, I am not being cool right now. I'm gonna try and explain things so that you don't need to watch all of the videos before, but if you are interested in everything that you're hearing, there's a whole playlist, and it is fun, and it is great background noise for when you are drawing. That's what this channel seeks to offer you, advice and background noise. Alright, so the quick rundown, I'm sure a lot of you already know this. The story is about a world full of elves. Everyone falls under one of 12 elemental powers that were combined together to create the world that they live on in. Whatever. And everyone exists on a continuum between mage and animal person. Mages look more like elves, animal persons look more like animals, and there is an animal associated with each element, and obviously like mages have their own specific element that they cast magic under. That's the rundown. If you want to know more about that, again, there's videos. So we've been focusing on a kingdom known as the Divine Kingdom of the Lindworm. They worship a giant worm that supposedly ate 12 stewards to combine the elements and create the earth. That is their dealio, and they are very, very into that, and they don't like it when you're not into that. And we've talked about a few provinces, and today we're going to be talking about Lastia. So, Lastia province. There's not a lot written here, apparently. We're going to talk about Lastia, okay? And we're going to go places. So Lastia is a hot and dry place. It was once the land of centaurs. Okay, it wasn't the land of centaurs. It was one of many lands of centaurs. There used to be tons of centaurs everywhere, but now there's not. And in Lastia, they were basically wiped out entirely. They no longer are a majority in any region whatsoever. During the Centaur War, the Divine Kingdom took over the Northern River, so there's like a big river that goes through Lastia, and they took control of that, and they dammed it, and they cut it off. Kind of influenced a big, huge drought and a famine that was then exacerbated by fires once the centaurs were kind of like displaced. Like there was also like a whole bunch of terrible magic that the Divine Kingdom got hold of. But regardless, once the centaurs were like displaced, Sylvan mages then showed up to revitalize the lands and the rivers, and heck, now it's theirs, I guess. And during this time, the regular flooding of the Northern River was like at its worst. So basically, they messed around with nature a whole bunch, and there was like seasonal flooding of the river every year. That was just part of kind of the weather of Lastia. It's like seasonal. It has like a seasonal rainy season. I'm saying season a lot, but it was thrown out of whack, and once the rivers were released, there was like massive flooding that usually occurs, but it was like really bad, and it destroyed a lot of like the settlements of fauns and druids that already lived there, and that sucked. Lastia nowadays has been settled largely by Hearth elves, and they came up from like the southwest. As you go northwards, you notice more sylvan fauns, so more like fox-like fauns versus more horse-like fauns. Sylvan and Hearth being two of the elements. Two of the most common ones we'll be talking about for a while. So due to its climate and like its position and the fact that its northern region was predominantly sylvan, the Plague of Lilies, which we have talked about before, which was a horrible plague, it didn't really affect Lastia at all. It was just too dry. Lilies couldn't really last long enough to infect people and kill them. So that is the basics of Lastia. See, pretty simple. We're gonna get a bit into like some of the major religions practiced here. There are 4 of them, one of them being the Lindworm Orthodoxy, which we have talked about earlier, because it is such a prevalent force within this entire story, honestly. The biggest thing practiced is Northern Hazalian, followed by Heiss Hearth traditions, and then followed by Sylvan Faun traditions. And there's very few here that practice Sylvan Faun. However, Sylvan Faun is going to be like 50% of what we talk about, I'm pretty sure, because these other ones aren't super in-depth. Lastia is kind of like a really short story for us to talk about, but the Sylvan Faun traditions, they go on forever, and they're kind of groundwork for a lot of like future religions we'll be talking about. So heck, with that said, Northern Hazalian. Let's talk about Northern Hazalian. Pretty big religion, moderate compared to like the Lindworm Orthodoxy and some of the Orc religions on the other continent, but still pretty big. It shares a lot of similarities with Hazalian faith, which apparently is something we should have talked about already, but we haven't. Do we have to? Let me check. Okay, yeah, we can talk about Hazalian faith. We're gonna go real deep, apparently. Okay, so shares a lot of similarities with Hazalian faith. So let's skip over to Hazalian before we talk about specifically Northern Hazalian. Wow, I'm sorry, guys. So Hazalian faith is practiced predominantly in the Duchy of Hazel. It has a large presence in the Duchy of Thane and like a little bit going on in the Divine Kingdom, particularly in Mistfall, which we aren't going to talk about for a while, so we're going to have to hold this knowledge in our heads. At its inception, these beliefs came from Meadow Elves. Meadow Elf is basically another term for fauns. Up north, they're called fauns, and down south, they are called Meadow Elves. They do look different, because the fauns tend to have like lower half looking more like animals, whereas Meadow Elves have upper halves looking like animals. I say this a lot in everything we talk about with this story, is that there is a lot of nuance to things. Terms like meadow elf, faun, and mage are very wiggly kind of terms, and they're meant to kind of make distinctions culturally for like spectrums. Therefore, meadow elf is like just a distinction within like the southern region. It's just kind of just like what fauns are called in the southern areas. Sorry for the tangent. Hazalian faith came from Meadow Elves. It centers around a belief that the Duchesses of Hazel are incarnations of the Hearth Steward. The stewards were the elemental god things, basically, that the Lindworm ate, and they believe that their Duchess is a reincarnation. The modern faith of Hazalian, they believe in the Lindworm, and they believe that it is responsible for devouring the stewards, and that includes Hazel, and they believe that it created the world, so it has a very similar foundation as the Lindworm Orthodoxy, and it's definitely become more like that as the Lindworm Orthodoxy has influenced the area. But what they believe beyond that, beyond the Orthodoxy, is that Hazel came back in mortal form. She did this because she has a super deep connection with the people of the land, because Hearth is like the element of family. It's like love, powers, connection, and family, and blah, 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 blah. So she was born into the world as a meadow elf, and she had like the head of a mule. Despite this, she showed incredible magic ability, because like I said, there's like a spectrum between like animal and elf. that spectrum is kind of based on how much magic you have, but despite having a donkey head, she was super good at magic. And they were like, wow. When she used her magic, she began to take on a bovine appearance. She started to look like a cow, and that is basically what Hazel is. She is like the cow goddess. As she used magic in her mortal form, she took on her more like godly form. And they believe that she has like a royal hearth. A hearth is like the family center where like magic amasses. I have a whole thing on it. I won't get too in depth about it. Just look at the magic system video. That was really early on and very important for a lot of stuff going forward. But her hearth is in the royal palace, but it also encompasses her entire land. Everything under the Duchess's control is part of her hearth. And the current Duchess of Hazel preaches a message of balance, and she encourages respect for the other stewards. More respect is given to the lindworm in modern times as well. Many celebrations that once were like made to honor Hazel are now honoring the lindworm instead and thanking it for like including her, being thankful that it brought all of the elements together. And the Duchess has further stated that this incarnation that she's currently in will be her last because she's done her duty and has led her people to the power of the lindworm. Initially, people were like, I don't really believe this. This is probably demons causing her to have weird thoughts. There's something amiss here. I think a lot of that came from the fact that the queen of the Divine Kingdom is turned into like a monstrous worm creature, and a lot of people are like, that's a demon. And ever since the duchy has been interacting with the Divine Kingdom, a lot of weird stuff has been going on with Hazel. But after the Divine Kingdom helped in ending the Plague of Lilies, which was horrible, the Divine Kingdom came and helped everyone out, ended that. They now believe in everything a lot more, and they're much less wary of the Divine Kingdom. Some even believe that the plague started in the first place because they started to like disbelieve Hazel, and they wavered so much in their faith and she lost power. That's Hazalian faith. Generally, like hearth practice is going to go back to like how it was described in the section about magic in the video I have about magic. Hazalian faith values hearth and family, but it also recognizes the order that one has to have and must respect all elements and keep balance within that. So each new moon is dedicated to bringing a new element to the hearth, and they do not bring offerings for the stewards because that's frowned upon. Instead, it's purely about like balancing their hearth and making sure all of the elements are present and get equal acknowledgement. For that very reason, there's no month that is specifically dedicated to the hearth element because it's all under this foundation of hearth magic. Yeah, they've moved, like I said, to worshipping the lindworm year-round. A bunch of holidays that were once about Hazel are now more about the lindworm. You'll find in most hearth religions, milk is always milk is always very important. I know, cow goddess, probably going to do that. And there was like a celebration that used to be for like the Duchess's birth that would happen every year, and people exchange cheese and creamy sweets and have a great time. But now it's about a worm, and that is the basic Hazalian faith. So Northern Hazalian is very similar to all of that. The difference is that they actually do not believe that the Duchess Hazel is an incarnation of the steward at all. Another difference is that there's a higher prevalence of mages within Northern Hazalian, and there are a lot more like magical traditions because of that. And there's also a lot more of an overlap, even more so with the Divine Kingdom than there even was like with just traditional Hazel. Northern Hazalians, they believe the same kind of thing. They have to keep balance at one's hearth. They believe that the lindworm devoured the 12 stewards, but they believe that Hazel returned to the land, but she did so long ago in order to like found her kingdom. So basically the divide is that they believe that Hazel is no longer around. around, and this was more like an ancient thing, and like the current incarnation, quote unquote, isn't actually an incarnation at all, but rather a descendant of Hazel. They practice a lot of the same practices with the same like moon cycle of worship between all of the elements, bringing that to the hearth. You know, they have the same holidays, basically. A unique holiday within Northern Hazalian is the Devouring of Hazel, in which effigies of the steward are carved into like fruit and vegetables, excluding Hazel, because hearth is always represented. With like the vegetables, they make stews and pies, and with the fruits, they make like little cakes or custards and other foods, and they usually use like a milk base, and that's kind of meant to represent hearth. And then everyone eats together and they reflect upon the wholeness of the lindworm, devouring all of the elements, and yeah, they have a good time with it. And that's Hazalian. We very quickly got over it. Quickly. What else? The other one that is practiced within Lastia is Heis hearth tradition. And I think Heis was one of the religions that was practiced in Blackward, which was the last province that we talked about. So Heis is another kind of moderately sized religion that focuses on hearth, and Heis traditions are like the remnants of beliefs held by people that once inhabited the kingdom of Heis, and Heis is a kingdom that like no longer exists, and it originally spanned the province of Lastia, and the royalty of Heis served as a major part of their worship. And the divine kingdom is very aggressive in converting the Heis people, but not as aggressively as we know them to be with other religions, because Heis is a little more easy to weave into the whole lindworm orthodoxy thing. The establishment of Lastia happened, and the royal family was killed. The Great Hearth, which is something they kind of worship, the Great Hearth was given to the Earl of Lastia and his family, and the people have so far like been allowed to kind of keep their idols and things, but they're no longer allowed to venerate the recently killed monarchs. Like, that's forbidden. Again, so like what they believe is that the Great Hearth in the city is basically where their royal family lived at. It was at the beginning of like this big river, and it's believed that all of the people of Heis are related to the Great Hearth in some way. They just have a lesser connection than their king and queen did. And it's believed that in death, that the spirits of the old kings and queens would travel through the river, and parts of their soul would come to live within the hearths of all those that would welcome the kings and queens' soul into their home. It was very important, this whole having a part of the monarch's soul. It's believed that when one dies, they remain connected to their hearth, and all hearths are connected to the Great Hearth. One that found home in many hearths can have their ashes put in the river so that they can find every place that they called home. Otherwise, ashes are kept. Like I said, they had these like idols of the kings and queens, and having a part of their soul in it was important. So to welcome spirits into the hearth, a vessel for water would be made for the kings and queens, and the kings and queens would have like very explicit instructions on what vessel they want when they die, and what materials, shape, and decorations are required. The vessel was then filled with river water and then given like a space at the dinner table. So food was then placed into that river water, and the vessel would then be like set on the hearth, left alone to do its thing. And if the spirit accepted the hearth, then the water would dry before the food would have a chance to spoil. Meanwhile, if food spoiled, it was rejected, and spoiled vessels needed to be disposed of properly before the water completely dries, because failing to do so would trap the spirit of the king or queen within it, and you would create an angered cursed vessel, which is not something you want in your house. So vessels are basically enchanted objects, and they're always enchanted, basically. There's just so much magic put into them, regardless of whether or not this whole like spiritual king, queen, monarchy thing is real. They are still very magical, and each one has its own quirks, and families teach new generations how to take care of each of the vessels. Vessels form like incredibly strong ties to their hearths and become like near impossible to remove, like no matter what you do. For royal vessels, there are always decrees on how they should be kept. Those get followed. The more vessels one has, especially the royal kind, the more fortune a family is supposed to have. Angered spirits, meanwhile, will curse families, all that inherit the hearth. The ones who would inherit the hearth is always like the eldest daughter. This happens whether she wants to inherit it or not. It is just that ingrained of a custom that it just happens, and like the vessels attached to the hearth that she is gifted will follow her wherever she tries to make her home and her family. Such is magic, am I right, guys? And like trying to escape it is kind of how you end up angering the spirits and making things worse, ending up with a bunch of cursed vessels following you wherever you go. So you kind of just have to take care of them. So there you go. Unfortunately, when Lastia was conquered, a lot of the vessels were destroyed through alchemy, which would get rid of their magic entirely. And while like a lot of people were allowed to keep most of their like vessels and things. However, if anyone was caught making a vessel to hold the souls of the recently killed monarchs, they would have their entire hearth just stripped of magic, which is pretty awful, but not like the most awful thing the Lindworm Kingdom does. Like, we're grading on a curve here, guys. Basically, like, as long as you accepting of the fact that the Lindworm is God, the creator of all things, you're allowed to have like a little bit of your old traditional stuff, you know, keep the peace, but, you know, Lindworm #1 guy. And those are like the two religions in Lastia that are accepted a little more because they're kind of more magical. At least they're considered to be magic, especially because a lot of it is like enchantment based, and the fact that most of these families were mages. The Divine Kingdom has a lot of problems with fauns, however, and sees a lot of like faun magic as witchcraft and therefore bad. Which leads us to Sylvan Faun traditions, which are fun. And like I said, not many are practiced within Lastia whatsoever. There's like a huge range that practices Sylvan Faun traditions, because Sylvan Faun traditions is more of like a general term to like encompass like a large group of people with all sorts of varied beliefs and stories, but with a sort of common mythos going on. Let's get into that mythos. And we're kind of done with Lastia. We're just going into faun traditions here. Most of these aren't even practiced in the Kingdom of the Lindworm. This is kind of like the majority religions. It's like the majority of like parts of the Sylvan Forest or whatever. Right, we're getting story time here. All right, Sylvan faun traditions. What do they believe? So they believe that the world came to be when a two-headed serpent named Zidwen laid an egg that would not hatch. It just wouldn't. And Zidwen was very upset about that. So Zidwen then sought power, and she did so by deceiving 12 beasts. And she lay there with her mouth open, enticing them to enter. Great strat. Dej entered first because he loves to explore. He was like, what's this cave? Fascinating. Thane entered second because he saw crystal in there and he's like, whoa, I love crystal. And then after that, there was Enna, Zel, Yu, Wen, Ida, Ukla, Esha, Oja, and then Hajeld. So wow, 12 of them. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize them. There will not be a test. So the 12 beasts stayed inside of Zidwen's womb until all of their souls were crushed into one. Then Zidwen laid another egg from her other mouth So she had laid one egg through one of her mouths, and then she lays the other one with the other mouth because she's a two-headed serpent. She's another cat dog. I don't know if I've talked about the cat dog serpents, but yeah, she's a little bit of a cat dog, and she laid 2 eggs from either of her mouths. This egg that was created by the 12 beasts in her womb, this egg is where Lethshiden develops. The world is supposedly the shell of Lethshiden's egg, and its surface is lush because of the power of Lethshiden. And in daytime, when you see the sky, that's Zidwen's body, and she's like incubating her egg. So she's like wrapped around it, keeping it all warm and stuff. And at night, Zidwen then leaves to tend her first egg, named Shunaden. The night sky is the world of the gods, where you can see like the many gods beyond, and where like the serpents live. And Shunaden develops inside of the moon. So the moon is supposedly Zidwen's other egg. All of the moon phases are the coils of Zidwen going over the egg. And when the moon is full, that's when Zidwen is not on her egg at all, and she's watching it to see if it will hatch. And she's always doing this because she's afraid that Shunaden is actually dead inside of the egg, but when she looks upon the beauty of the full moon, the glow of it, it always convinces her that she needs to keep trying, and she continues to tend the egg. The sun in the daytime sky, that is Zidwen's heart, and when she's feeling sorrow, the sky turns dark with her sadness, and when she's angry, there's like lightning and thunder. And when she thinks of Shunaden, you can see visions of the moon appear in the sky. So that's why you see the moon in daylight. That's because Zidwen is thinking about her other baby. So the Great Serpent, she doesn't really care about the people of the world. The only thing that matters to her are her 2 children and the power needed to make her children hatch. Like, that's what she likes. The beasts that reside inside of Lethshiden, so the earth egg, they have varied opinions on many things, and because they're so divided, there's a whole bunch of turmoil inside of Lethshiden's soul, and therefore the egg can't hatch. That's why the earth like remains an egg, even though it's very not dead inside of it. So Dejg and Anna, they're great explorers, and they really want to be free. They're like, let's hatch this egg. And Thane is just kind of like happy because he's in a shell of crystal, and Thane just freaking loves crystal. And he's like, you know what? Like, let's just stay in here. It's like so crystal. Wen loves destruction, so Wen is like, let's bust this egg open. I'm down, let's do this. Ida and Zell, they miss the light and the stars, so they're like, let's do this. Oja hates life and wants to be dead like the moon, so he's not down with hatching. And Then wants to be great. Yu wants everyone to hate each other and suffer. Yu is always up to that kind of thing. Yu is. Ukla fears the consequences of what they will become, so he really doesn't want to hatch either. So there is a lot of discourse within this egg, within the soul of Lethshiden. There are only 2 beasts that care about the elves, and those beasts are Aisha and Hajeld. So Aisha is the source of all living things. He's analogous to Ash, the steward Ash, and Hasha. They're all kind of like the same mythos thingy. They're like a bear god. So Aisha is one of them, and he is strong, and he was a bear before Zidwen ate him. And Hajeld is very kind. However, she's often very swayed towards hatching because she cares a lot about babies, motherhood, and she feels really bad for Zidwen and wants her eggs to hatch. But she also really cares about family and stuff and doesn't want to destroy the earth. It's complicated. It's hard. Living is hard. So those that believe in this religion, they believe that there's nothing they can do to influence the gods or the beasts whatsoever. They instead ask for favors. And Aisha will listen to the plight of elves, but he listens most to the Dacia. The Dacia is just like a word for fox fawns. If you look like a fox, Dacia's more likely to listen to you. If one shows kindness to the natural world, he will treat them well regardless, however. The other beasts can be spoken to, but they basically see elves as ants. Every elf is born with power obtained from one of the gods, and sometimes their gods will take interest in them, and usually this is just because they're bored or angry. And that's why like the word like Dacia exists. There's like a word for like every single type of elf within like the Sylvan Faun common language. The practices of Sylvan Fauns is pretty varied. However, on a whole, it is typically about avoiding the gods as much as possible. Instead, one is meant to kind of just enjoy the land, enjoy being alive. Celebrations are very regional and very specific, and they focus more on like what life has to offer within the area that they live rather than any sort of like god worship. And there are many like folk stories that exist within Sylvan traditions, and they're shared and passed around. They vary in tellings, but most center around people that are displeased or mistakenly interacted with gods. So it's a common lesson. Let's frickin' learn some of them lessons. Let's get some examples here. Okay, so one story is about the forest compass. This story is about Adida, so a sheep fawn. They are very lazy, and they are constantly asking Ida Ida, the Lucent goddess, over and over to guide them through the forest. Ida Ida gets very upset about this and feels very, very disrespected. She gets Aisha to turn this little sheep into a plant. Again, this varies regionally, but it is said that Ida Ida still continues to guide them. However, now all in the forest get to look at where the plants are growing, and that is how you can like figure out direction based on like, you know, like where certain mosses grow and whatever. It is because of some loser sheep that was bothering the Lucent goddess. Thank you, sheep. Another story is about the wolf girl. So once there was a Dishiden, so a divine elf, we love him, who traveled from the south, and she was pretending that she had this like insane divine knowledge and that she was like very godly or whatever. And many people began to worship her, and she never had to work because she had everyone doing all her stuff and had them convinced she was a god. However, one day, Then heard her preaching and was really confused and realized what was going on. And Then got really angry because Then, as some know her, Fen, the wolf goddess, is just a really, really angry lady. So seeing this false prophet, the divine goddess then turned the girl into a wolf. And at first the girl was like, you know what? I'm going to take this for my advantage. And she went back into the world and she started claiming that she was Then. But no one was buying it because she was just a wolf. And they weren't deceived and they chased her away. Reluctantly, the girl decided, okay, I guess I'll go live with wolves. She decided that maybe she could trick the wolves too into believing that she is actually a god. Yeah, the wolves, they weren't fooled at all either. And she smelled like deer because divine elves are deer. For the rest of her life, she was hunted and chased by wolves, and she died alone, mistrusted by everyone. So yeah, don't pretend to be a god. That will end badly for you. Then will be mad. So some other mythos things. So they believe in the Serpent Queen, which is kind of true because we've mentioned before that the Queen of the Divine Kingdom did get turned into a snake. So they call this Gotlesh Lethchiden. This tale is that they believe that the beasts are trying to escape from Lethchiden by becoming mortal person. Aisha has tried many times leading the druids by coming to Lethchiden has seen many times the different beasts within him have tried to take form before. So Aisha has tried leading the druids as a bear, and Hageld once called herself Hazel and mothered the southern country. That does link to what we were saying, so that's the belief that Hazel was reincarnated on Earth and led a country. So they do believe that Hazel is actually a goddess. So seeing all this, Zidwen then tried to do the same thing. So in order to try and coax Lethshiden out into like an elven form, but it didn't really work because it's not truly Lethshiden, because Lethshiden cannot exist until there is true harmony within his soul. So instead, a monster named Gotlesh, who calls herself the Queen, was created instead. And Gotlesh is a serpent that lives in like a crystal cave, and she's worshipped by the Dishiden, so like the divine elves, and she's made of like the mixing of the beastly powers, and she looks like a snake. And fawns are kidnapped by the Dishiden to feed to Gotlesh, and they pray to Lethshiden, unaware that like they're empowering him to destroy the world. So that's basically what they think of the divine elves. They think they worship a snake monster creature that is seeking to end the world. Along that line, there's like a bunch of like monsters and demons, I guess. That's what we would call them. Like I was saying earlier, every elemental elf is considered a different race in fawn culture. However, they know that there are 12 elements, but they haven't seen 12 different types of elves in the world. So there are some that they haven't seen, and that is the Diju, the Dujkla, and the Didoja, and those are the Curse, Void, and Eventide elves. Each of them has their own mythos because they don't really exist. These are kind of like the legends that have been shaped in like the absence of like knowing what all of these elves actually are. So the first one is the Diju, and that is the Curse elf. And a Diju is a monster that is owned by you own it, but no, it's owned by the beast Yu. And there are many ways that Yu makes her elves, but most often Yu pretends to be Hajeld, so she lends her power instead. So like when someone is like praying to Hajeld for like help with pregnancy or like basically anything like that, pregnancy, child rearing, what have you, she will like pray to Hajeld, and instead of Hajeld, Yu shows up and listens to the plea instead. And Yu then creates a Diju, and they are incredibly painful and need to be like aborted basically, and if not, the mother will die, and Yu will try and lead like a mother away from her people under the guise of Hajeld. She will just continue to like mess with them. Yu is the only one capable of delivering a baby Diju. So under the power of Yu, the Diju grows quickly. All right, you can check out here, but like going forward, we're talking about creepypasta monsters, I guess, and it gets very horror. So as I was saying, the Diju grows quickly and ends up ripping free of its mother, and Diju are like these black wolves with like all these super long legs, and their skin is all like cracked with mange, and like insects are drawn to them, and they're just gross and terrifying. The Diju will remain attached to its mother, and it will keep her alive through its umbilical cord and use power. And Dijus are said to turn like animals in the area rabid around them, and they blight forests and they make nightmares, and they're just horrific creatures. If an elf or a fawn nears a Diju without like holy protection, they will suffer like a horrible illness. Looking at a Diju in the eyes is said to cause like a stroke. You know, that's why there's not like super great a consistent understanding of them, right? So these monsters will grow for their entire life, but they do not need food. Instead, the Diju eats its mother's guts and does so like over and over, and Yu uses powers to make the guts grow back. Isn't Yu lovely? And Yu doesn't really bother with like healing limbs or anything. Old Diju, like the really old ones that have been growing for a long time, they're like these giant centipede creatures, and they hold like the diseased, rotten meat of their mothers still alive against their little chests, and Yu loves it because the mother remains aware and in pain despite being rotted away entirely almost. And Diju can only be killed by cutting the cord by something blessed by Hajeld, so something actually blessed by Hajeld. To prevent this from ever happening, one needs to take extreme caution before they ever ask Hajeld for help, because, you know, you might just be inviting you into your life, and she's a bad lady. She is the goddess of curse, so she's the goddess of pain and suffering, so she loves that stuff. That one's horrific, I guess. I can't believe. Okay, we're going on. The next one are Dushkla, and Dushkla are the void demons that are born under the power of Ukla. Very few of them exist because Ukla isn't really interested in the world at all. The Dujkla that do exist are children that end up accidentally crossing Ukla's path, and his magic just kind of like hits them a little bit, like not on purpose. Dujkla, they live in dark caves and they look like cats out of the corner of your eye. The lost voices of children echo in their like little kitty mules, and they can be heard like begging and crying to be found. And if one does actually find the Dujkla, they are erased from existence entirely. And because of this, no one really truly knows what a Dujkla actually looks like. Final one are the Didoja, and they are dead children. So they're like dead children, babies, stillborns. The fetuses, like dead women, they're just dead because they are related to the eventide element, which is like the element of death. And Oja is the one that gives them power, and they're a really common creature compared to the other two. If one knows what to look for, they can easily find them, but they're hard to interact with, if at all. So they appear as swarms of flying bugs. When one looks closer, they can see the shape of a person. And Didoja are often very angry because they are so unnoticed, and they will swarm and sting those that they meet. Young Didoja are just more like annoying insects, and they're kind of like clouds of gnats. And these Didoja are like looking for affection, and that's why they're all in your face and annoying you. But little can be done to help them, and they're just really sad creatures, and they cannot like accept gifts, and they can't talk, and it's just really sad. And after like a long life, they live like as long as any other fawn would. They live as various clouds of insects throughout their life, and their final form is like a swarm of moths, and all of the moths will break away in search of fire. And when all of the moths of a Didoja will burn up, their spirit is freed from Oja's grasp at last, and they get peace. So those are some of the legends and stuff. I didn't want to say shit yet. Meanwhile, what did I talk about here? Yeah, so that's all of like the common Sylvan fawn traditions, and there's all sorts of other little stories and stuff like that, but that's the main ones. And yeah, I think that is Lastia. We talked about it. Like, I find it really fun to create like myths and legends within a magical story. So like creating things that like aren't necessarily true, but you can understand like where they come from. Like, I find that really cool and fun to do, and I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you guys next week. Yeah, I hope you liked it. Please like and comment, and I loved all your comments last time. It fills me with so much joy and happiness. And yeah, if you want to learn more, subscribe or look at the playlist, because there's so many fun stories for us to hear about. All right, goodbye.